Hi guys, today I'm going to be making a resin geode out of this piece of MDF that I cut out. It's just a piece of wood you can get at Home Depot, and then just cut the shape out, and I sand down the edges and go over it with a coat of white spray paint to seal it. The first thing I'm going to do is get my gloves on. You always want to use gloves when you're working with any kind of epoxy resin. The next thing you're going to need is one of these respirator masks. Anytime you're working with epoxy resin, it's very important that you wear one of these. This geode that I'm about to make is going to be a rainbow. So what I did was I put some colored pigment powder in the bottom of these little cups. I've got orange and red. And then I have yellow and green. And I also added some glitter into these because we want it really sparkly. And then I got here some blue and some purple. And I put, some colors have glitter, some don't. I use different types of glitter also. And then I go ahead and I take these Dixie cups. I like the ones with the lines on them because they help me measure out my resin. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. So I'm going to get 2 cups and I'm going to take my Artworks resin. So I'm going to go ahead and take part A and fill up this cup, trying to figure out how much I'm going to need for this project. I'm going to go ahead and fill this up to the top line. Then I'm going to go ahead and grab the Artworks resin part B, and you're going to want to pour into the cup the same exact amount that you did for part A. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and grab this plastic measuring cup, and I'm going to pour part A and part B both into this cup, scraping the sides and making sure that you get every drop out. Now I grab my timer, and for Artworks resin, it's recommended that you mix it for a good 4 to 5 minutes. Make sure you scrape the bottom and the sides so everything is blended equally. Okay, now that I have my resin mixed, I'm going to put out my cups in a row and begin to fill them with the mixed resin. I recommend mixing each cup for approximately a minute just to make sure that all the pigment is thoroughly mixed. Otherwise, you will get little tiny clumps that look like dots all over your artwork. Now I'm going to go ahead and start pouring the resin, starting with the purple stripe first. I just go ahead and pour it on. I forgot to mention, make sure that your piece that you're working on is level. Otherwise, you're going to take all the time pouring it out the way you want it, and you're going to step away and come back and see that it all slid off of one side because it wasn't level. So make sure it's level. Here I'm just using my plastic mixing stick to make sure that the resin is going over along the edge. And then I'm going to go ahead and pour the blue on. I leave a little bit of space in between the colors to allow for it to melt and fuse into each other. And then I'm just going to use my stick to go over all of the little areas to make sure that they touch. Next up is the green stripe. So I'm gonna go ahead and pour that on. Same thing, just leave a little bit of space and then use my stick to fill in the gaps so they touch. Here I'm just going to pick this up and tilt it a little bit because I want my colors to be even in width and the purple looked like it was pouring over the edge a little too much. So next up is going to be the yellow. So I'm going to go ahead and lay that down. And now we have the orange stripe. So I'm going to go ahead and put that down. Then use my stick again to make sure that the colors meet. And last but not least, we have the red. So I'm going to pour that on and then use my stick to blend it over the edge. And now the fun part, you take your torch and you're going to use it to go over and pop all of the bubbles. This is my favorite part. It also makes it, when you hit it with the torch, it makes the resin thin out and it bleeds together better. And it also warms it up and it makes it look like glass. So I just decided at the last minute that I was going to mix up some gold resin. So I'm going to put some little gold highlights in between each color layer. So now that I have all my gold mixed up, I'm going to take this long Q-tip, the stick part of it, and dip it in the resin. And then what I do is I just run it through in between the color layers. And then once again, I'm going to take my torch and go over it to pop any air bubbles. Now I'm going to take my smaller butane torch and I'm just going to hold the heat on top of the gold, because there's something about the reaction of the heat when it hits the gold pigment. It's almost right before you singe it, it starts to spread out into like cells and it makes it spread, gives it a really cool effect. And here is a close-up of it all finished. So now I'm just gonna let this cure overnight and see what we have in the morning. Okay, while the cameras were off, I took my hot glue gun and I just glued some acrylic crystals onto the inside edge, along with some quartz points and some rainbow quartz points. I didn't videotape that, but you can see them on there. I went ahead and mixed up another batch of resin, and now I'm just gonna use a popsicle stick to drizzle it all over the gems and crystals that I glued on. And then I just go ahead and I dump the remainder of the mixture all over the geode, and then I'm gonna take my stick and make sure it covers all the way to the edge. Make sure you scrape every bit out because every bit counts. On a side note, I normally don't pour resin inside of my house. I usually do it outside on my lanai where there's well ventilation, but it was pretty chilly out that evening and I didn't want it to cure uneven, so I brought it in my house and I did it in the living room. Sometimes it happens. And then I'm just gonna grab my torch and quickly go all over it just to pop all of the air bubbles and to give it that glass-like finish. Just be careful when you're using this torch that you don't hold it in the same place for too long because it will burn. And this is the final product. It's all cured and dried. I sanded the underside where all the drip marks are, and here it is. Thanks for watching my geode tutorial. If you're interested in buying this type of resin that I use, it's called Artworks Resin, and you can find it online at www.thecraftattack.com.